What's up, America? It's time to shelter in place with me, Andrew Coppins, as we critically think together for the next hour right here on Mojo 50 Radio. I hope you're having a good Saturday. Hope the kids, the wife, the husband, whomever is in your household is not already driving you bat nuts crazy. But if you're listening via podcast, I encourage you, especially during this absolute crap show that's happening around coronavirus, to watch the show live, interact with the show, and listen to the show live if that's your pleasure, rather than watching this beautiful mug on your screen. But anyway, if you want to interact with the show, you can do that by following on Facebook, on Twitter, Instagram, at The Coppins Show. Very simple. And yeah, folks, right here in the bottom, or is it over here? Yeah, over here in the bottom of your screen, you see how to spell my last name. But if you're new to the show and you're listening, it is spelled Coppens, Coppens. As always, leave that 5-star review. Leave your thoughts on the show. Leave a comment. This is how this show continues to grow, and I hope you're enjoying it. So, of course, you can always see this show in its entirety if you want to over at the YouTube page, youtube.com/Andrew Coppins, youtube.com/Andrew Coppins. In fact, I'm actually going to ask an important question and give you a little snippet of what I do on that YouTube page outside of this show. As we look at this coronavirus or COVID-19 or Wuhan coronavirus or Chinese virus, which I'm not going to be using just simply because if you're going to use the term, it should be Wuhan coronavirus. But anywho, all I'm saying is that there are important questions that need to be asked, and I think it's important that we get those questions asked, potentially answered here on this show. So we're going to give you a little bit of that food for thought here on the show, mainly asking the deregulation that surrounded the FDA and CDC when it came to COVID-19 happening this week versus, 3 months ago? And so many more questions. But before we get into the meat of the show, MojoCon is supposed to be happening in a couple weeks, and I just used the word supposed, so as you likely have heard, it is postponed, likely until the fall. Social distancing and sheltering in place and all the freak out that's happening. And perhaps I say it's a good idea anyway for you Mojo sexuals out there. Who knows what or whom you've been into, but seriously, please note, MojoCon has been postponed. If you're planning on flying, you're going to want to contact the airline, let them know, and hopefully get a refund. If not, get a credit and use it for MojoCon at a later date. Do not forget, we want to meet with you guys. We want to do those things, but right now this is just not a possibility. So what is coming up on the show? Well, of course, we're going to talk COVID-19. That cannot be avoided. I'll be asking important questions like, why are we trusting the very people who got us into the mess to get us out of it? Republicans love socialism? I'm going to give you my top 5 things to do while on shelter-in-place orders, like we are here in the wonderful state of Illinois. I'm in my bunker. We're all good. There's also some hope in the midst of all of this doom and gloom, so I really want to highlight some of that, and I've got some levity and fun planned because it can't all be serious. Before we dive into the deep end of coronavirus or COVID-19, gotta remind you, if you still have a job and you want to support Mojo 50 Radio, and if you don't have a job and you want to support Mojo 50 Radio, you can do that this month. We're featuring Rocky Stucci in the Situation Room here on this very network every single Monday through Friday at midnight Eastern, Sunday 11 p.m. Central Time for those of you on the Central Time Zone, obviously. That is all going to take place every Monday through Friday for you. If you haven't checked it out, I suggest doing so. You can even find it on YouTube. It is a really fun program, and considering the seriousness of what's happening, I think this is a great time to check it out. But most importantly, go to mojo50.com/donate. A $25 donation gets you to become part of the Meatball Army. You'll get an exclusive t-shirt from our friends at Sovereign Rising Printing. You're seeing it on your screen right now. It's pretty awesome. And who doesn't love being part of the Meatball Army? If you need to check out the show, do so. You can do it on YouTube. You can hear it and see it live every Monday through Friday at midnight Eastern time. It is a monumentally awesome program, so don't forget that. But anyway, let's get into some of this talk about COVID-19, and I want to bring you my food for thought video. And folks, this is why I ask you to subscribe, hit that notification bell, because these types of videos get produced each and every week in between our talk here on critical thinking. So without further ado, let's get into that mix. Today's first question, because I've got a lot of them, but the first one is, why are we letting the government overrun our liberty so easily? I know we're supposed to be good little sheeple, shelter in place, and all of that jazz. But if you're going to tell us to do all of that, I'm sorry, you're going to have to give me more than, well, simply because the disease might spread more quickly to others and there could be some death. Sorry, but we've got governments destroying businesses, livelihoods are going bye-bye overnight, and then we have a government that is telling us magically they're going to save the day. Do you really think that unemployment numbers would jump some 800% in Maine without these draconian measures in place? Hell, in Massachusetts, they saw over 20,000 unemployment claims on Monday alone, which was more than the state had the entire month of February. Folks, that doesn't happen that fast with an economy, even if it was in a normal decline. It does happen as governments begin to mandate shutdowns. The media constantly runs numbers of COVID-19 positive tests and death tolls on your TV screens. All of it induces panic, and the lowest paid, sometimes hardest working amongst us, get crushed under the weight of the decisions the government is making. So forgive me if I have a few questions as to the efficacy of what you're doing. Forgive me if I don't just sit here and take it, but instead insist on you and the government showing us proof that what you are trying to tell us is actually going to be working, because we're about to tailspin an economy before it's actually naturally in a downward spiral. We'll save that part of the conversation for another time, but the point here is that we've heard a lot of what to do and why to do it without actually any proof of it working. We're living in fear based on a semi-educated guess, and a guess that many experts are now pointing out may not even be known to be effective or not. We've got known leftist organizations telling us models predict millions are going to die if we don't do something. Sound familiar? We've got a new Stanford Spark study suggesting we're actually overreacting and maybe doing harm to our economy that is unnecessary. These are but a few examples of conflicting pieces of information. I'm not saying I've got the answers, but this entire program is about critically thinking, and that means being unafraid to ask really big and important questions that may not be popular to ask. So I ask you, the American people, how long are you going to allow your government to take away your liberties based on hope and hope alone? I'm definitely willing to avoid a pandemic, even if it causes our economy to tank. If we can prove the measures the government is telling us is going to help, will actually help. But we're treating a new virus as if the Black Plague is upon us and we must not allow certain death at our doorstep. Something just isn't right about what's going on in America right now. Could it be that our power-hungry friends in Washington, D.C. and state houses throughout the country are actually just using this as a moment to capitalize on the fear that they have created and implement, more control over populations that they've long wished for? Just look at what's happening with the solutions advocated for by some on the political left and the political right. They read like a laundry list of wishful thinking gone bad in many cases, and they all seemingly involve the government as a savior to an economic problem largely created by their reactions or lack thereof to COVID-19. Level heads, smart planning, and effective leadership waved bye-bye a long time ago in our political world. This isn't a left or a right thing. This is a crisis of real leadership and effective communication. That goes for the fear-mongering media and the politicians standing in front of us every day. They are sure long on doom and gloom and short on answers based in reason and logic. For example, has anybody asked, let alone answered the question of why the CDC was the only point of testing for COVID-19 for months and months, even when we knew about the virus's quick spread? Why were regulations so harsh that a vaccine couldn't be produced in short order and its research incentivized a long time ago? It took our government until last week to release the hounds of private business to bail their ass out. Only after we got the government out of the way, have testing kits finally become readily available, and critically, results also coming in faster and more accurately too. It's only after the government got rid of a ton of the red tape around vaccine and medication production that we saw multiple groups come around to attempt to get clinical trials up and running. Maybe we've got something in place, I don't know, in about 12 to 18 months, but thanks to the government, we wasted valuable months of potential trial periods. And who knows, we may actually already have had a vaccine that would be viable in near production. It's not like we didn't have a 3-month warning or anything. The point here, we're supposed to trust the very people who have gotten in the way of fixing this mess to then unravel the mess? Definition of insanity, anyone? Yes, my personal intuition is to be more contrarian in nature. But I'm also willing to, listen to evidence and reason and, dare I say, science from all sides of a debate. That's the key word, debate. As it comes to this COVID-19 situation, there certainly hasn't been much of a debate. If you dare to question why things are happening, the mainstream media will label you a denier and a danger to society. But part of critical thinking, which is actually critical to solving this very pandemic we're experiencing, is challenging assumptions, challenging conventional wisdom, and indeed being a contrarian. Asking questions is not wrong. Pretending you've got all the answers and dismissing questions is wrong. Forgive me for holding our government to a higher standard as they shutter businesses, demand that we shelter in place, restrict more liberties like gun buying, ammo buying, and all of that, even when you can leave the house, and then also tell us it's all for our own good. Then tell me why places like New York City and Philly are threatening to throw business owners in jail if they happen to stay open against government command. Yet people who would break into those businesses are now magically not to be prosecuted, and their fellow low-level criminals are being let out into the general public instead of sheltering in place in jail. Does that make any sense? No. If we are to shelter in place, we should be separated from people susceptible to spreading the virus, like those who are in jails, which are not exactly havens of health and sanitation. Shouldn't those people be forced to stay there until their sentences are up, not being released early or given no bail and potentially spreading the virus, following the advice given to us in the first place? Those two ideas don't square. Also not squaring is shutting down sporting events, restaurants, bars, and all of that. Yet, we can still get on an airplane, huddle in those TSA lines, we can still get on public transportation, we can still get on a train, and up until very recently, travel outside of the US was still a thing, including to Canada, who, by the way, allowed Chinese travel into that country up until yesterday. We haven't closed the southern border as of this piece either. If we're supposed to be shutting all of it down because social distancing is the only way to flatten the curve, these two concepts do not square. Yet those are the responses our government has given to us. I call bullcrap on our government's thinking here. So beyond the mixed messaging from our governmental officials, I want to get into math and science, because the left tells us we've got to rely on those things in their gospel. So let's start with #math, right, Andrew Yang? I'll start with an easy equation. Wouldn't more tests being made available and thus being used necessarily increase the number of infected people? I ask this because every day we see the shock headlines in the media, both from the left and the right. And I find myself thinking, no shit, Sherlock. Oh my God, did you know that we saw XYZ more cases today than yesterday? Newspaper headlines and websites splash with the latest scary positive tests and death numbers. So I'm going to say it real slow for the non-critical thinkers out there. More tests available equals more people being tested, which equals more total numbers of, wait for it, people that will test positive. The key is percentages. Are they skyrocketing? Are they staying the same or even reducing? You've got to compare positive, negative, and inclusive results. In fact, let's take, for example, this number, 8%. Did you know that the University of Washington, it's recently upped their testing capacity, and it's only resulted in a total of 8% of the people being tested actually coming out positive for COVID-19. 8%. Now let's look at this larger chart by UW Virology, where we see a pretty flat trend line in the positive test results from week to week. If we saw a steady incline on those numbers week over week, that would be frightening. Instead, we see what's on the screen right now, and the spike is actually in the negative category. That could be threefold. One, it could come from the fact that more people are being tested, as I stated before. Two, it could be that we're also seeing more accuracy in the testing itself, giving us better negative results. And third, more people are thinking they may have it and are getting tested, which is highly unlikely given the fact that there are pretty strict regulations on who gets tested. Regardless, science tells me that the vast majority of even those who believe they're really sick are actually not infected with COVID-19. And it may be that we are also at the end of, flu season, the beginning of allergy season, and we've been told for a month now that COVID-19 symptoms mimic those of allergies and flus very closely. Runny noses, cough, sore throat, and all that, making it hard to pinpoint exactly what somebody has without running a myriad of tests that may be very unnecessary given just how closely related treatment of these things actually are. Damn math, reasoning, and science. My final question. If all the evidence they tell us is true, then why aren't we reacting this way every time the flu comes around? This is not to dismiss the seriousness of COVID-19, because for some people it's very serious, and we should be mindful of others if we are sick. But again, that's good general advice. I'm only comparing to give some perspective here. Yes, we're having an outbreak of COVID-19, but we get really bad flu outbreaks too, and they are a hell of a lot more destructive to society if you believe that death via virus would be the measuring stick. You know, some 61,000 deaths in the 2017-18 season alone in the United States, compared to what, less than 10,000 dead for COVID-19 the world over? Do you want me to do the math on the numbers worldwide for the flu versus COVID-19? Can you imagine what they would look like without a vaccine for the flu? Speaking of vaccines or cures, there's a peer-reviewed study, damn science once again, that tells us a simple combination of already available drugs is actually curing COVID-19 in under 6 days. You want full information? Go to covidtrial.io. But what you need to know is the study in France, one of the 3 hotspots in the world for this virus, tells us that using a malaria drug and depending on the severity of the COVID-19 case, adding in azithromycin, can stop the virus in its tracks, as in 100% of those in the trial were cured in the time of the trial. 100%. So let's say, on a grander scale, that the 100% number isn't wholly accurate. Say even 50% efficacy is achieved. Why in the hell isn't the world over trying it, and why can't we just get back to our lives as soon as we see the first positive results here in America? We know how it can be stopped. Let's stop panicking the economy too. Luckily, President Trump jumped on this, and it appears ready to attempt to try something like this to stop the panic while dealing with the needs of those who end up with the virus. Instead, we've got a media and political class still trying to freak us out, impose insane bans, and not keep us calm and give us the positive news that there might be real hope. But back to the larger point here, even if the medication combination doesn't work, what standard of response to viruses and diseases are we now setting compared to the rest of the known viruses and diseases out there? We weren't in freakout mode despite the CDC, which we're told is God on information, telling us that we were 0.2% off an epidemic level of the flu this season, nearly 7.1% mortality rate. And did you hear it once on the news, let alone 24/7 until we all panicked? Did you see the panic over 10,000 deaths due to the flu in the United States alone by February? All I'm saying is proportionality should be a thing here, and perhaps taking a step back and thinking unemotionally is the smart way to handle this. Let's control the things that we can as a society, practicing good hygiene, staying home if you're sick with the cold or the flu, damn it, and being good to our fellow mankind. Let's then get the government out of the way, or at least acting as a positive partner in helping to solve problems as they exist. Sometimes time is our friend or our enemy, and vaccines coming to trial along with already known medications that have proven to be effective may indicate this is all ridiculous, especially if we keep this crap up beyond the end of this month. It's sitting right in front of our faces. So try what the study in France tells us is working. Trust science and get the hell back to living life before we allow our government to just drop us into a ditch that will look worse than the Great Depression. All for what math and science are telling us isn't any more devastating than the common flu. Yes, its spread is worse, but as we ramp up testing, the math is telling us the mortality rate is not that much different. It's not enough to stop living our lives in a thoughtful way. Certainly not enough to put our entire lives on hold. Let's be real here. Eventually, this is likely to become just a common coronavirus or something we don't even talk about again after this year is up. Like, none of us think of the flu unless you're getting notified to get your flu shot for the year. All I'm saying is, if you want me to believe this virtual shutdown of our world is worth it, you're going to need to provide actual scientific proof that what is happening is working. But that's virtually impossible thanks to your own incompetence over at the CDC and FDA, so good luck there. So I hope you guys enjoyed that little bit of kind of digging into data and digging into all of that. But I also want to highlight some things that have been going on, mainly pork, and more pork. Because last Saturday, we supposedly had a deal in place for this economic relief. Well, there's now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've lost count of how many economic relief bills that have been passed. Okay, but the first one, it was passed, but as usual, it turns out the American people are or were being screwed. And the politicians on Capitol Hill, they're not letting a crisis go to waste. They're just pushing through their political pet projects. You see, its current iteration, according to Reason.com, includes free coronavirus testing, additional funding for food security initiatives, bolstered unemployment insurance, and a temporary paid leave program. But under the latter provision, according to Reason, those who have coronavirus, who are acting as caretakers for one or more family members with coronavirus, who are quarantined, or whose schedules have been scrambled by widespread school closures, are entitled to 2 full weeks of full paid sick leave and 3 months, yes, 3 months of paid medical leave, where workers would collect no less than 2/3 of their wages. The government would reimburse the cost with new tax credits to the businesses, but there's a catch. The tax currently exempts businesses with more than 500 employees from having to comply. Why? Why would this be a thing that people have to not comply with if they've got 500 or more employees? I say this is just cronyism at its finest and ugliest. This is just pure politics. Why would this happen? Well, it's very simple. You, 1, want this to happen. 2, you want the Republicans to then vote down this bill based off of this poison pill that's in it. And then 3, you get to use this as a political cudgel come election time. And then 4, you hope you've got the power to just make this happen at a future date because you know it's dead in the water. But another article from Reason points out this from the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which means that it's not what it's all about. While the total cost of the bill is still unclear, it would cost at a minimum tens of billions of dollars. The price tag associated with the food portion alone is $1.3 billion. Unemployment benefits follow closely behind at $1 billion. But perhaps the most outrageous part of the proposed legislation is the government-mandated paid sick leave program, which, as the bill currently reads and was passed, would be permanent. Should the bill pass, businesses would be federally required to provide 7 days of sick leave, with or without a pandemic. This provision's got little relevance to addressing coronavirus and much more to do with leveraging the crisis to prop up policies popular within the Democratic Party. That couldn't be more clear in the legislation's stalking component. The text specifies that should somebody need to miss work due to an instance pertaining to stalking, domestic violence, or sexual assault, or should an employee need to help a friend going through such an event, a private business would be federally required to provide paid sick leave. What does that have to do with coronavirus? Well, Reason, that's a good question. What does that have to do with coronavirus? I think we should be asking ourselves that question with each piecemeal bill that Congress is passing, including the one that we're fighting over right now. In fact, I want to pick up on that bill when we get back from the break. Yes, Congress is fighting over socialism, or is it? What does it have to do with coronavirus? Think about it, and we'll come back right after this. All right, folks, welcome back into Critical Thinking. I know I said I wanted to pick up back on what was happening in Washington, D.C., but before we get into that, I have got to say, you folks, if you can, support our friends at American Pride Roasters. I have got on the roof $20, same as downtown, the Doc Thompson Memorial.
The best part of my day is starting it with a cup of American Pride Roasters coffee. This is the official coffee of Mojo 50 Radio. My favorite blend is white chocolate caramel. Silky caramel dripping on white chocolate bars. Caffeine gaspic. Can you just imagine the goodness? I don't imagine it because I have my own bag that I brew when life needs a reality check with APR coffee. Go to AmericanPrideRoastersCoffee.com and order your blend today. No matter how you drink it, with cream like me or black like this whole month of February, American Pride Roasters Coffee will make your day. Tell them that Watson from Battle for Freedom sent you. American Pride Roasters Coffee. Might I suggest the Watson White Blend? I mean, the white chocolate caramel blend. That's if you're into that kind of thing. Get your APR coffee today. American Pride Roasters.
So AmericanPrideRoasters.com, AmericanPrideRoasters.com. Get yourself some of that. The On the Roof. I've really enjoyed the Burr Hamilton in the past, as well as the awesomeness that is the Frederick Douglass. Check those all out at American Pride Roasters. And folks, I am telling you right now, the coffee drops. The coffee drops. I am not the biggest coffee person in the world, but my God, they are delicious. So again, hit up AmericanPrideRoasters.com, the official coffee of Mojo 50 Radio. And while you're doing that, make sure to hit me up on social media at The Coppins Show. All right, folks, I know we wanted to talk about this situation in DC and all the bills and all the calamity that's happening, but I just had this op-ed come to my desk, and I think it's a really good way for us to frame the discussion about what's happening in DC, because this op-ed is from a world-renowned medical expert in the Washington Times, and it actually asks the very same question that I was asking before here on this show in a much more medical way. That question is very simple. Is it worth it? Is it worth it? Is it worth taking our economy? Is all of what is happening worth what we are sacrificing? I get it. Putting mankind over yourself is vitally important and something that I try to emphasize in my real life to begin with. But when it comes to this pandemic situation, we've got to be sensitive to the most vulnerable amongst us. And that is where Dr. Katz, who is the director of the Yale Griffin Prevention Research Center, wants to really focus on. And I think it's important to talk about this op-ed. But most importantly, before we get there, there's another study from Stanford and its SPARK study, which suggests that, guess what? The reaction that we're having here in the United States is not helping. And it might be being done wrong, and it might do more harm than good. So I encourage you to check that out. I believe there's a good synopsis over at the Daily Wire, but I want to get into what Dr. Katz has had to say here, because he writes in this New York Times op-ed two main ideas: herd immunity and isolation for the most vulnerable populations, as he states the following. Like the coronavirus pandemic, the infamous flu pandemic of 1918 was caused by viral particles transmitted by coughing and sneezing. Pandemics occur when an entire population is vulnerable, that is, not immune to a given pathogen capable of efficiently spreading itself. Immunity occurs when our immune system has developed antibodies against a germ, either naturally or as a result of a vaccine, and is fully prepared should exposure recur. The immune system response is so robust that the invading germ is eradicated before symptomatic disease can develop. Importantly, that robust immune response also prevents transmission. If a germ can't secure its hold on your body no longer serves as a vector to send it forward to the next potential host. That is true even if that next person is not yet immune. When enough of us represent such dead ends, as it likes to be called, for viral transmission, spread through the population gets blunted and eventually terminated. That is called herd immunity. So Dr. Katz continues. This is the important part here. I want you to listen to the data. Dr. Katz says the data from South Korea, where tracking the coronavirus has been by far the best to date, indicated that as much as 99%, again, 99% of active cases in the general population are mild and do not require specific medical treatment. The small percentage of cases that do require such services are highly concentrated amongst those aged 60 and older, and further, so on for older people as well. Other things being equal, think about this. Those that are age 70 or over appear 3 times more likely to die. Their mortality risk is 3 times greater than those in the 60 to 69 age range. And those over the age of 80 are nearly twice that the mortality rate of those aged 70 to 79. So 60 to 69, okay, those people are the least at risk in this group. Those over between 70 and 79 are 3 times more likely than that group, and then 80 and above, twice the group from 70 to 79. So Dr. Katz points out that the data from also in Wuhan, China, and even the Diamond Princess cruise ship give very similar results, with the death rate amongst that insular and uniformly exposed population being roughly 1%. 1%. Now, is it greater than the flu and it's 0.1%? Yes, that's 10 times. I get that mental math. But do you want to look at the overall death numbers? It's not even close. The flu kills at least 6 times as many people as here in the United States, by the way. It's not even close. The flu kills at least 6 times, 6x, more people here in the United States in 1 year than the coronavirus has killed worldwide to date. Furthermore, Dr. Katz argues that our idea of flattening the curve may actually be doing more harm than good. He says the following: I believe that we may be ineffectively fighting the contagion even if we are causing economic collapse. There is another and much overlooked liability in this entire approach that we have. If we succeed in the slowing of the spread of coronavirus from torrent to trickle, then when does the society-wide disruption end? When will it be safe for healthy children and younger teachers to return to school, much less older teachers and teachers with chronic illnesses? When will it be safe for the workforce to repopulate the workplace, given that some are in the at-risk group for severe infection? When would it be safe to visit loved ones in nursing homes or hospitals? When, once again, my grandparents pick up their grandchildren? There are many possible answers, but the most likely one is we just don't know. And that is the problem, folks. Okay? That is the problem. Nobody can give me a definitive answer as to when this ends. And that's the main crux of my issue with all of this. We cannot tank the economy temporarily without an end date. Okay? I'll get to that in a bit. But Dr. Katz continues. We could wait until there's an effective treatment, a vaccine, or transmission rates fall to undetectable levels. But what if those are a year or more away? Then we suffer the full extent of societal disruption the virus might cause for all of those months. The cost, not just in money, are staggering to contemplate. I agree with Dr. Katz here. That is the main crux of the issue. 6 months, 9 months, a year. They're talking 12 to 18 months for a vaccine to be in place. At what point in time do we say, you know what, people are just going to get it and we'll deal with these issues? So what is the solution to all of this, according to Dr. Katz? Well, it's focusing on allowing the healthier portions of the population to develop immunity through exposure and isolating those with the greatest risk of death and severe complications from this virus, mainly the elderly, those that are immunocompromised, and those with chronic diseases like diabetes, heart disease, and all of that. Folks, this is a medical professional at one of the most prestigious institutions in America, and he is telling us that we're killing our way of life and may not be doing anything to actually stop the spread of this disease. So his final piece of advice here is that this focus on a much smaller portion of the population and isolating them, making them stay at home, making them get out of the ecosystem. Okay, if you will, this focus on a much smaller portion of the population would allow most of society to return to life as usual and perhaps prevent mass segments of the economy from collapsing. Healthy children could return to school and healthy adults go back to their jobs. Theaters and restaurants could reopen, though we might be wise to avoid very large social gatherings like stadium, sporting events, and concerts for right now. So long as we are protecting the truly vulnerable, a sense of calm could be restored to society. Just as important, society as a whole could develop natural herd immunity to the virus. The vast majority of the people would develop mild coronavirus infections, while medical resources could focus on those who fell critically ill. Once the wider population has been exposed and, if infected, had recovered and gained natural immunity, the risk to the most vulnerable would fall dramatically. A pivot right now from trying to protect all people to focusing on the most vulnerable remains entirely plausible. With each passing day, however, it becomes more difficult. The path that we are on, Dr. Katz says, the path that we are on may well lead to uncontained viral contagion and monumental collateral damage to our society and economy. A more surgical approach is what we need. Speaking of surgical approaches, let's get back to Washington, D.C. and what's happening right there. Right now, we've got the Democratic Party basically saying that we've got to increase the support for unemployment insurance and buttress that up, and we've got to make it readily available to anybody, and we've got to do X, Y, Z, right? It's all about making sure that more money is pumped into the unemployment insurance side. Meanwhile, Republicans are suggesting that we just cut checks to the public tied to income and giving more money, ironically, to those at the top instead of the bottom. Has coronavirus actually made everybody in DC a damn socialist? It sure kind of sounds like it. On the one hand, government checks for unemployment. We've got to increase the money into a government program. On the other hand, let's make sure that government provides income to everybody, regardless of their situation. Look, I get it. Temporary help is needed. But of course, DC can't figure out the targets, right? The more surgical approach to their assistance. I understand that this is a really disruptive virus, that this is a really disruptive situation to the economy. And we've got to have our government, if they're not there to protect our safety and our health and our wealth, what is a government good for, right? But we're not even everybody on both sides, Democratic, Republican, their ideas are not just to target the needy. Their idea is throw a blanket and hope to God that that works. Throw a Hail Mary and hoping it works instead of doing the smart thing, sitting down, understanding the data that is coming into them, and making decisions based off of that data. 20,000 people, as I mentioned in that previous video, 20,000 people on Monday in Massachusetts applied for unemployment. That was more than February combined. So maybe in this case, the Democrats are right to think about how do we make sure that unemployment insurance is, one, fully funded, and two, ready to handle that type of an influx. Unfortunately for the Democrats, the people that are in charge of the unemployment insurance and that infrastructure say they can't handle what would be coming down the pipeline. They're not equipped to be able to do that. So maybe the solution would be to tell people that this is what's going to happen, and maybe some of those individuals who are now unemployed could actually be employed by the unemployment agency and the unemployment insurance side of things. Maybe that's a temporary situation. I don't know how quickly that would work. I mean, there's got to be training and all of those things, but I'm just throwing ideas out there, okay? I am totally fine with temporary help considering that government is also people. I'm also fine with temporary help considering what? The government is the group that is creating this economic problem to begin with, where via their shelter in place orders and all of the things that local and state governments are doing. They're the ones causing this panic. Just like mom and dad would tell you and I growing up, you made the mess, you clean it up. I say the same thing to our government. The problem is I just don't trust these people as far as you could throw them. So, what should we do? Well, I think my solution to all of this would be, one, a tax holiday, along with targeted mortgage and rent relief on a temporary basis. Why a tax holiday? Because nobody would be paying taxes, not businesses, not employees, not anybody. And that means way more money into the pockets of those individuals who are still working, right? That in effect would turn around and help us stimulate the economy, stimulate some savings, stimulate some things that need to happen because we're all interconnected. If you haven't figured that out, the business down the street that's a restaurant closing affects those individuals who work there, who can't afford to get a haircut, who can't afford to pay for groceries. Then grocery stores close and hair salons and barbershops start closing, and it's a snowball effect on our economy. Okay? So, those that are getting a paycheck, they get a full amount, right? They get all of what they're going to get, but they also get more. That's important in this because it helps buttress what is happening. But on top of this, as for mortgage and rent relief, if you're unemployed, my idea would be this. You've got 60 days of relief at this point. Okay? Temporarily put in place a 60-day moratorium if you miss your mortgage payment or your rent payment for 60 days. You cannot be evicted. You cannot be foreclosed on. And then proof comes in the status from the unemployment agency in your state. You can hand that over to your landlord. You can hand that over to your mortgage company and let them know that this is what is happening. You fall into that program. Now, that should help with the individuals who are now faced with the choices of, do I pay my rent and mortgage or do I feed my family? Right? That is the temporary right thing to do here, I think. Allow people to not pay taxes, and we've already extended into July the tax filing date. But for those of us who might actually be getting money back, meaning we've loaned the government more money than we should have to begin with, take the money now. Allow yourself to stimulate the economy. Allow yourself to save away for that rainy day, right? Allow those individuals to do that. This is the key here. We have got to find a way to kickstart the economy, and I think these are two ways to do it. And most importantly here, all of this has got to be temporary. We have got to put a deadline on all of this stuff, whether that's a 60-day moratorium on mortgages and rents and 60 days of a tax holiday. What I think you might find out is that people, when they realize how many hundreds of dollars they're paying in payroll taxes, are going to want to keep that money themselves, and then we've got a government who doesn't have the payroll tax anymore. That's probably a positive as far as I'm concerned. But deadlines, folks. We have got to know that this is a temporary situation, that these things are going to end. We don't have those answers. Everybody tells us that, well, it might be April 7th. Maybe it's April 12th. Then there's some places where they're closing things all the way through April 30th already. That's asinine. Absolutely asinine. What this economy needs, what markets need, what business owners need is stability and hope. Stability and hope that comes from seeing light at the end of the tunnel of this really, really dark time in American history. So I propose all of those things, but then I put a deadline of 30 days. Because if in 30 days we haven't figured out that flattening the curve is or isn't working, we're screwed if we continue to go any further. So maybe until the middle of April that this goes on. After that, we reassess and either we go full bore back to it and start Dr. Katz's suggestions. But so either we go back to living life as normal, start reopening businesses, start getting people back to work, start the school systems coming back online, and focus on those things that Dr. Katz have told us is probably the best case scenario for us here in the United States. Just like flu season impacts things, this is going to impact things. The quicker we're able to realize that advice of Dr. Katz, the better our society and our economy will end up being. And also, folks, one real quick thing that I wanted to point out here from Bernie Sanders, no less.
We must make sure that companies that get bailouts are required to sell equity to the government and put workers on their board of directors.
That is where some of this is going. This is people like Bernie Sanders, AOC, and others looking at this crisis from the lens of let's get our pet projects. Folks, when I talked about are we all socialists now, we're this close to people suggesting for real in passing legislation that would nationalize things. If we go down that road, if you want help from a business perspective, we own part of you. If you want this, if you want that, we're going to make demands on you and take some of that ownership. That is socialism in practice. That is completely insane. Absolutely insane. But let's not just go completely insane. Instead, let's have a little bit of fun right here on Mojo 50 Radio. And of course, that means top 5 things to do while you're stuck at home with this whole coronavirus pandemic and all of that wonderful goodness. All right, folks. So after all of that doom and gloom, I've got a few fun things planned here at the end of this show. You know, I know we've talked a ton of coronavirus and all those things, but part 4 is the top 5 things to do while you're on virtual lockdown or shelter in place or stay at home order or whatever your state or municipality is telling you you've got to do. These are things that could be family orientated or individual orientated, but they're in no specific order. So one thing, puzzles. Keep the mind engaged. Keep it from wandering into terrible territory. You can focus on a puzzle. You can focus on those things. It takes your mind away from things, but it also focuses the mind. It's a really good mind exercise. It can be done individually or as a family. And most importantly, you can always keep a glass of wine or that beer or bourbon near you while doing so. Secondly, board games. I think this one's a pretty obvious one. Some of you have also seen throughout the year or so that this program has been on board here on Mojo 50 Radio. I've got a pretty decent collection of board games, and by I mean we here in the Coppins Casa. Yes, my wife and I have a love of board games. Find yourself a good game, whether it's Monopoly or something else that would be family orientated, whether that might be Hungry Hungry Hippos or whatever game is out there. Find yourself a way to entertain the family, but also creating family bonding moments. Take the time if you're out of work to be able to do those things. Take the time when you're working from home to take a little bit of time out of your day. Focus on the family. But for me, it's just my wife and I right now. So maybe games like Ticket to Ride or Carcassonne, something that 2 players can play, whether that might be cards or whatever. Find yourself a way to stay mentally active and stop your mind from wandering. The number 3 activity, baking. Believe it or not, baking, and no, you crazy freaks in Mojo Land, I'm not talking about that kind of baking, because inhaling smoke of any kind is kind of counterintuitive to a respiratory virus that is causing a pandemic here in the United States. But baking would be a good way to connect as a family, and yes, even for you macho guys out there. Baking, doing an activity like that, can be a lot of fun. It can create conversation. It can, stimulate laughter. It can stimulate creativity. And most importantly, it can taste wonderful. All right, beyond that, I've got 2 more here. Let's go to the 4th one. Learn a new skill. Why not take these weeks or this next month and, I don't know, that skill you've always wanted to learn, or, read about, or that new thing at work that you've always been interested in but just never have had the time to do anything about. Pick it up. Take a look. Do the research. Take some time to learn a new skill or that hobby that you've always wanted to lean into. I think those are a good thing. Then finally, take a walk. Get out of the house. Go outside. Walk around your community. That should let you know that you're not just completely shut into your house. This ain't China. You ain't getting welded into your home. Continue to support community businesses that are still open. Go for a mile walk. See what businesses are open. Maybe pick up some dinner or some lunch. Bring it back to your house. Get some exercise. Exercise the mind. Exercise the body. You kind of get the point here. We got to avoid cabin fever with these types of things. What other things would you suggest? If this crap continues for more than a couple of weeks here, we're going to need all the inventive things possible to avoid going absolutely nuts. And speaking of nuts, did you see the funny ribbing between Andrew and Chris Cuomo on CNN the other day? Well, at It's Reactor on Twitter had a bit of fun with it, and I think we should end the show that way.
Wants to hear from you, just so you know.
Yeah, I called Mom just before I came on the show.
It's not what
By
she
the
said.
way, she said I was her favorite.
She never said
Good
that.
news is she said you were her second favorite son,
No.
Christopher.
We both know neither of us are Mom's first or second favorite in the family. I can't believe you're lying to my audience. You've blown the credibility of the entire interview. I should have ended it before.
Second favorite son. Listen to the
I didn't
words.
hear it.
Listen to the
Politicians
words.
are very tricky. You throw a word
Yeah.
in there after the first time you said it, creates a lot of doubt. But I
Not
appreciate
me.
you clarifying
Not
it.
me. Straight across the plate.
Stay strong.
Straight across the plate.
Stay strong. Stay for your people. And I appreciate you being here. I love you, brother.
Personally, I couldn't stop laughing at the aging 2 men on the screen and then giving them baby voices while they fought like little children on national television. Well done. Well done. Until next week, I'm Andrew Coppins. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at The Coppins Show. Do not forget the HoloNet and the hashtag Millennial Conservative Resistance is here next on Mojo 50 Radio with Matthew Holloway, my brother from another mother. Until next week, Matthew 544.